The Pomegranate Seed, Part 7, from the Tanglewood Tales. To the queen's astonishment and joy, she could perceive no token of the child's being injured by the hot fire in which he had lain. She now turned to Mother Ceres and asked her to explain the mystery. "Foolish woman," answered Ceres, "did you not promise to entrust this poor infant entirely to me? You little know the mischief you have done him. Had you left him to my care, he would have grown up like a child of celestial birth, endowed with superhuman strength and intelligence, and would have lived forever. Do you imagine that earthly children are to become immortal without being tempered to it in the fiercest heat of the fire? But you have ruined your own son. For though he will be a strong man and a hero in his day, yet on account of your folly, he will grow old and finally die, like the sons of other women. The weak tenderness of his mother has cost the poor boy an immortality. Farewell." Saying these words, she kissed the little Prince Demophon and sighed to think what he had lost, and took her departure without heeding Queen Metronira, who entreated her to remain and cover up the poor child among the hot embers as often as she pleased. Poor baby, he never slept so warmly again. While she dwelt in the king's palace, Mother Ceres had been so continually occupied with taking care of the young prince that her heart was little lightened of its grief for Persephone. But now, having nothing else to busy herself about, she became just as wretched as before. At length, in her despair, she came to the dreadful resolution that not a stalk of grain, nor a blade of grass, not a potato, nor turnip, nor any other vegetable that was good for man or beast to eat, should be suffered to grow until her daughter was restored. She even forbade the flowers to bloom, lest somebody's heart should be cheered by their beauty. Now, as not so much as a head of asparagus ever presumed to poke itself out of the ground without the especial permission of Ceres, you may conceive what a terrible calamity had here fallen upon the earth. The husbandman plowed and planted as usual, but there lay the rich black furrows, all as barren as the desert of sand. The pastures looked as brown in the sweet month of June as ever they did in the chill November. The rich man's brood acres and the cottager's small garden patch were equally blighted. Every little girl's flower bed showed nothing but dry stalks. The old people shook their white heads and said that the earth had grown aged like themselves and was no longer capable of wearing the warm smile of summer on its faces. It was really piteous to see the poor starving cattle and sheep, how they followed behind Ceres, lowing and bleating, as if their instinct taught them to expect help from her, and everybody that was acquainted with her power besought her to have mercy on the human race, and, at all events, to let the grass grow. But Mother Ceres, though naturally of an affectionate disposition, was now inexorable. "Never," said she, "if the earth is ever again to see any venture, it must first grow along the path which my daughter will tread in coming back to me." Finally, as there seemed to be no other remedy, our old friend Quicksilver was sent post-haste to King Pluto in hopes that he might be persuaded to undo the mischief he had done and to set everything right again by giving up Persephone. Quicksilver accordingly made the best of his way to the great gate, took a flying leap right over the three-headed mastiff, and stood at the door of the palace in an inconceivably short time. The servants knew him both by his face and garb, for his short cloak and his winged cap and shoes and his snaky staff had often been seen thereabouts in times gone by. He requested to be shown immediately into the king's presence, and Pluto, who heard his voice from the top of the stairs, and who loved to recreate himself with Quicksilver's merry talk, called out to him to come up. And while they settled their business together, we must inquire what Persephone had been doing ever since we saw her last. The child had declared, as you may remember, that she would not taste a mouthful of food as long as she should be compelled to remain in King Pluto's palace. How she contrived to maintain her resolution and at the same time to keep herself tolerably plump and rosy is more than I can explain. But some young ladies, I am given to understand, possess the faculty of living on air, and Persephone seems to have possessed it too. At any rate, it was now 6 months since she had left the outside of the earth, and not a morsel, so far as the attendants were able to testify, had yet passed between her teeth. This was the more credible to Persephone inasmuch as King Pluto had caused her to be tempted day after day with all manner of sweetmeats and richly preserved fruits and delicacies of every sort, such as young people are generally most fond of. But her good mother had often told her of the hurtfulness of these things, and for that reason alone, if there had been no other, she would have resolutely refused to taste them. All this time, being of a cheerful and active disposition, the little damsel was not quite so unhappy as you may have supposed. The immense palace had 1,000 rooms and was full of beautiful and wonderful objects. There was a never-ceasing gloom, it is true, which half hid itself among the innumerable pillars, gliding before the child as she wandered among them, and treading stealthily behind her in the echo of her footsteps. Neither was all the dazzle of the precious stones, which flamed with their own light, worth one gleam of natural sunshine. Nor could the most brilliant of the many-colored gems which Persephone had for playthings vie with the simple beauty of the flowers she used to gather. But still, wherever the girl went among those gilded halls and chambers, it seemed as if she carried a nature and sunshine along with her, and as if she scattered dewy blossoms on her right hand and on her left. After Persephone came, the palace was no longer the same abode of stately artifice and dismal magnificence that it had been before. The inhabitants all felt this, and King Pluto more than any of them. "My own little Persephone," he used to say, "I wish you could like me a little better. We gloomy and cloudy-natured persons have often as warm hearts at bottom as those of a more cheerful character. If you'd only stay with me of your own accord, it would make me happier than the possession of 100 such palaces as this." "Ah," said Persephone, "you should have tried to make me like you before carrying me off. And the best thing you can do now is to let me go again. Then I might remember you sometimes and think you were as kind as you knew how to be. Perhaps, too, one day or other, I might come back and pay you a visit." "No, no," answered Pluto with his gloomy smile. "I will not trust you for that. You are too fond of living in the broad daylight and gathering flowers. What an idle and childish taste that is. Are not these gems which I have ordered to be dug for you, and which are richer than any in my crown, are they not prettier than a violet?" "Not half so pretty," said Persephone, snatching the gems from Pluto's hand and flinging them to the other end of the hall. "Oh, my sweet violets, shall I never see you again?" And then she burst into tears. But young people's tears have very little saltiness or acidity in them, and do not inflame the eyes so much as those of grown persons. So that it is not to be wondered at if, a few moments afterwards, Persephone was sporting through the hall almost as merrily as she and the 4 sea nymphs had sported along the edge of the surf wave. King Pluto gazed after her and wished that he too was a child. And little Persephone, when she turned about and beheld this great king standing in his splendid hall and looking so grand and so melancholy and so lonesome, was smitten with a kind of pity. She ran back to him, and for the first time in all her life, put her small, soft hand in his. "I love you a little," whispered she, looking up in his face. And I think we'll pause here and continue with this story in the next video. Thank you so much for listening. Please reach down, click like, subscribe to our channel if you haven't, and leave a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. Always remember, I love you. And as Tigger says, ta-ta for now.